They say the earth holds secrets it was never meant to reveal. Beneath the soil and the blackened belly of the planet are places untouched by time and tormented by it. For centuries, whispers have circulated about caves so sinister they twist the minds of those who enter, never to return the same. Some never return at all. From the blood-stained walls of the chasm of Wales in Chile to the ancient, rune-ridden corridors of Drax Maw in Eastern Europe, these places aren't just haunted, they're alive, breathing, waiting. A team of thrill-seekers, skeptics, and spiritualists, each with their own demons, sets out to uncover the truth behind the world's most haunted caves. But what they find will challenge the limits of sanity, bend the line between reality and nightmare, and expose the darkness that dwells not only in the earth, but in us all. This is not a story for the faint of heart. So before we descend together into the abyss, ask yourself, would you step into the mouth of the earth knowing it may never let you go? Would you listen to the whispers echoing from the dark? If they called your name, comment below. What's your biggest fear in the dark? Have you ever felt like something was watching you in an empty room? Or worse, inside a cave? Like, share and subscribe for more spine-chilling stories because the descent has just begun. The rain pelted against the rusted roof of the van as it wound its way through the narrow forest-flanked road leading deep into the Romanian wilderness. Inside, 5 strangers, each drawn to this expedition for reasons they kept tucked tightly behind tight lips and restless eyes, sat in uneasy silence. The only sound aside from the hiss of tires on wet gravel was the rhythmic clunk of windshield wipers, slicing through the fog like dull blades. At the wheel was Dominic Voss, a retired combat photographer turned documentary filmmaker, haunted not just by war zones, but by something darker. He'd seen things through his lens no man should. Now he searched for something more elusive than enemy fire. Answers, truths, redemption. Next to him sat Dr. Helena Mirek, a Czech parapsychologist with a reputation for investigating supernatural phenomena in places no one else dared enter. Her clinical detachment was deceptive. She didn't fear the dark, but she respected it. Behind them, Riley Quinn, a popular YouTuber known for his fear-chasing channel, live-streamed snippets of their approach. His cocky grin and sarcastic banter were a thin veil over the fact that he hadn't slept in 3 nights. Not since his last video had captured something his audience dubbed the crawling woman. He laughed it off, but he'd started locking his bedroom door. Juno Reyes, an underground cave diver with a past shrouded in mystery, checked her equipment methodically, her hands moving like a metronome. She rarely spoke unless necessary. A long scar across her cheek told a story no one dared to ask. And finally, Father Marcus Klein, a defrocked priest turned occult investigator, sat silently with a leather-bound book resting on his lap. No one had invited him. He'd simply shown up at the meeting point with a quiet authority that dared anyone to question him. No one did. Their destination, Grota Lacrima, translated ominously as the Weeping Grotto, a hidden cave system beneath a long-abandoned monastery known among locals for its chilling history. In the 1500s, the monks had mysteriously vanished overnight. Since then, shepherds and travelers who stumbled into the vicinity reported screams, unearthly whispers, and visions that bled into reality. As the van rolled to a stop in front of the moss-choked ruins, the rain ceased abruptly, as if the clouds themselves were holding their breath. The group stepped out into a silence so thick it wrapped around them like gauze. "We're here," Dominic muttered, shouldering his camera rig. The monastery ruins were skeletal. Stone arches stood like the ribs of a buried titan, and the entrance to the cave yawned at the foot of a shattered altar, half covered in ivy, the other half scorched black from an ancient fire. Juno stepped forward and knelt by the entrance, brushing away debris to reveal a rusted iron plate with Latin etched into its surface. "Vox tenebris non mentitur," Helena squinted. "The voice of darkness does not lie." "That's comforting," Riley muttered, flicking his flashlight on. Without another word, they descended into the darkness. The stone staircase was narrow, steep and slick with moss. Water dripped rhythmically from the ceiling, echoing into an unseen vastness below. The further they went, the colder it became, unnaturally so. Helena noted it silently. No wind, no airflow. Yet the temperature dropped with every step. About 50 feet down, the stairs ended abruptly in a cavern, lit only by their flashlights. A narrow corridor branched off to the left, carved with unsettling symbols, some matching nothing in any known language. "Is that blood?" Father Klein asked, pointing to a smear on the wall. "Old iron deposit," Helena said, but her voice was uncertain. As they moved deeper into the cave, an oppressive feeling began to settle on them. Time seemed to stretch, warp, and contract. Their footsteps no longer echoed the way they should. Sound moved strangely down there, muffled and distorted. Riley turned to film Helena speaking, but when he replayed the footage seconds later, her mouth moved, but no sound came out. "What the hell?" he whispered, turning pale. "Electromagnetic disruption," Helena said too quickly. "Common in cave systems." They reached the first chamber, massive, dome-shaped, with dozens of ancient wooden crosses embedded in the rock like some forgotten reliquary. Several had rotted away, but others stood untouched by time, wax from long-extinguished candles clinging to the base of each one. Then, a whisper. Software. Female. Not echoing from any direction in particular. "Help! Me!" Everyone froze. "Did you hear that?" Riley whispered. "No one say a word," Helena instructed, pulling out a handheld audio recorder and holding it into the silence. The whisper returned, louder this time. "Please, help!" But it didn't sound like it was coming to them. It sounded like it was inside them. Riley dropped his camera with a curse, backing away. Juno's flashlight flickered violently, and for a brief second, her beam caught something moving at the edge of the chamber, slithering low to the ground, fast and gone. "What was that?" Dominic hissed, aiming his camera wildly. Juno didn't respond. Her eyes were wide, locked on the dark tunnel ahead. Suddenly, the chamber filled with a sharp, acrid stench of burnt hair. Father Klein clutched his chest and fell to his knees, whispering a prayer in Latin. His book slipped from his fingers and opened to a page depicting a hooded figure with eyes bleeding ink. "I warned you," he gasped. "This place is cursed." Marked Helena tried to help him up when something invisible lashed out from the darkness. A gust of air knocked them both to the ground, and a shriek pierced the chamber, high-pitched, desperate, inhuman. Dominic's camera caught the moment in brief, jittery frames, a shape forming in the mist, not fully materialized. A face pale and eyeless, mouth agape in a scream it couldn't release. Then silence. Their flashlights steadied. The cold remained. But the whisper was gone. Juno finally spoke, her voice hollow. "We're not alone down here." No one responded. They all felt it now. Something ancient, patient, and utterly malignant. And they had just begun. They stood frozen, the echoes of that shriek still clawing through their minds. No one moved. No one breathed too deeply, as if the very act of drawing breath might invite whatever was lurking in the shadows to strike again. Dominic was the first to recover. He checked his camera, hoping to find something, anything, to explain what had just happened. But when he replayed the footage, the pale, eyeless face was absent. The frames that should have captured it were smeared with static and digital noise, as though something had reached into the camera and corrupted the very film. "This thing messes with tech," he muttered. "Of course it does." Juno turned toward the corridor. "We can't go back up yet. The shaft's too steep without gear. We need to reach the lower caverns. There's a secondary exit by the old catacombs, if the maps are right." "If," Riley barked, his face pale. "I'm not crawling deeper into this hellhole based on maybe an old maps. Didn't you see that thing?" "We'll die if we panic," Helena snapped, her tone steel. "Stay together. Stay quiet." Father Klein was still on his knees, murmuring something in a rasp. Dominic knelt beside him. "You okay?" "They're listening," Klein whispered. "It's not just spirits. There's something worse. Watchers. I felt them when we passed the old altar. They don't like light. They feed on the weak." "We're all weak down here," Juno said flatly, tightening her harness. "Keep moving." They proceeded through the next corridor, long, narrow, and lined with what appeared to be carved niches in the stone. Each recess held a crude wooden figure, contorted into unnatural shapes, bound with twine, some missing limbs or eyes. Riley hesitated near one and shined his flashlight in. His beam flicked over something unsettling, what looked like real human hair tied into the twine of the effigy's head. "What the hell? These aren't just decorations," he whispered. "They're offerings." The air thickened as they moved forward. The further they descended, the more distorted the environment became. The walls pulsed subtly as if breathing. Shadows shifted in ways they shouldn't, some flickering just out of reach, others holding too still, refusing to be chased away by light. Then the hallucinations began. At first they were small, a flicker of movement, a voice calling your name. Riley was the first to break. "Okay, no, number. I'm not going crazy," he said, spinning around. "I just saw my dad back there. I haven't seen him in 10 years. He's dead. He was dead." Helena stepped toward him, her voice gentle but urgent. "What did he say?" "He didn't say anything," Riley said, shaking. "He just stood there. He was smiling, but it wasn't right. It looked like his face was peeled on." Klein nodded grimly. "They mimic the dead. Use your grief like a lure. That's how they break you. Make you question what's real." Dominic suddenly grabbed his head and groaned. "Something's wrong. I'm hearing—" He stopped. His eyes glazed over for a moment. He stared into the dark. "What is it?" Helena asked. "I thought I saw my wife," he muttered. "I buried her last year. She was standing in that passage. Her lips were sewn shut." Juno moved to check the side tunnel. There was nothing there, only darkness, and the faint, impossible sound of humming. A lullaby. "I know that song," she murmured. "My mother used to sing it before she drowned." Helena took out a small vial from her pack and dabbed some of the clear liquid beneath her nose. "Anise and wormwood extract dulls the sensory manipulation. Everyone take a whiff." Riley hesitated, then took the bottle. "You carry hallucination suppressants like gum?" "In this line of work?" Helena muttered. "Yes." As they continued forward, the cave began to narrow, until they were crawling on hands and knees through a passage no wider than a man's shoulders. The walls were damp and warm, the stones slick like flesh. Juno led the way, her headlamp illuminating the path inch by claustrophobic inch. Then she stopped. She didn't say a word, just stared ahead, unmoving. "Juno?" Dominic called softly. She didn't answer. Helena scrambled forward and looked over Juno's shoulder, and immediately understood why she froze. They had emerged into a circular chamber, and hanging from the ceiling, like grotesque chandeliers, were bodies. Dozens of them, wrapped in decaying robes, suspended by the ankles with chains. Their faces were covered with iron masks, each carved with different expressions: agony, ecstasy, rage, fear. "Oh my God," Riley whispered. "Those are monks." Helena pulled out a tattered page from her journal. "In 1534, the entire monastery's order vanished. Some say they descended into the cave to seal a gate. This could be them." Father Klein stepped forward, staring at the masked corpses with horror and awe. "This was a sacrifice. They gave themselves to hold something back." Then one of the bodies twitched. Riley screamed and stumbled backward. The chains rattled. Another body twitched. "Move!" Juno shouted, pushing through the room. "Don't stop! Don't look back!" The bodies began to convulse, rattling and shaking as if electrified by some invisible current. The air filled with a deafening chant, low, guttural, in a tongue none of them recognized. As they passed through the far end of the chamber, Dominic glanced back. One of the masked monks had raised its head. Its iron mask was cracked down the center, and behind it, he swore he saw glowing eyes. He didn't say a word. He just ran. They found themselves in a passage unlike the others, lined not with stone, but with bone. Skulls embedded in the walls grinned down at them from every angle, as if mocking their terror. The deeper they went, the more distorted the tunnel became. Space bent. Lights flickered. Time stuttered. Riley dropped to his knees, vomiting violently. I can't, I can't do this anymore. We're stuck. We're dead. Get up, Helena barked. It's watching us, Riley shrieked. I saw it. The thing with the black eyes. It's following us. Then the walls began to whisper. Not a hallucination. All of them heard it this time. Return, return, return. They pressed forward into a chamber where 7 stone pillars stood in a circle, each etched with ancient runes, each seeping blood from hairline cracks. Klein gasped, dropping to his knees again. This is it, he said. The gate. The others stared, horrified, and from somewhere far behind them, something was crawling, something huge. Its breathing rumbled like thunder through the caverns. The walls pulsed, and from the darkness behind them, a shape began to form. Long, spindly, limbs clicking over stone. It had no eyes, but it saw them all the same. It dragged itself slowly, deliberately, each of its limbs bending the wrong way, like marionette strings pulled by something not of this world. The creature's skin, or what passed for it, was pale and slick, stretched over its elongated frame like thin, wet leather. It had no face, just an expanse of flesh where a mouth or eyes should have been. But still it watched them. The group stood in paralyzed silence, the air suddenly so heavy it crushed the breath from their lungs. Every instinct screamed run, but their bodies rebelled, rooted to the blood-seeping floor of the gate chamber. Then Father Klein began to speak, not to the group, but in Latin, reciting verses none of them recognized. His voice shook, his hands trembled, yet the words came fast, fluid, ancient. The creature halted just at the edge of the chamber. Klein's voice grew louder. The thing hissed. Steam rose from its flesh. I'm holding it back, Klein wheezed. The pillars, they're a ward. It can't enter while the spell holds. But it won't last. The blood is weakening them. Helena ran to one of the pillars, touching the surface. The blood that seeped from its cracks burned her fingertips. She pulled back with a hiss. Multiple entities, Dominic said grimly. We're being herded. As if confirming his words, the tunnel behind them collapsed in a shower of bones and dust, cutting off the path they came from. The things were forcing them toward the center of the gate, toward the pit. In the middle of the chamber yawned a perfect black circle in the stone floor. It was no natural opening. It pulsed with energy, rimmed with symbols etched so deep they looked carved by talons. Cold mist rose from its center, swirling in unnatural spirals. That's not a tunnel, Juno whispered. That's a door. Helena flipped frantically through her notebook. This isn't a cave system. It's a seal, a prison. These pillars, they're not decoration. They're locks. A shriek pierced the air, so sharp and shrill it fractured their senses. Riley dropped to the ground, clawing at his ears. Dominic grabbed him by the jacket. Get up, damn it! We're not dying here. But Riley's eyes were glassy. He was seeing something else entirely. They're already inside me, he muttered. I can feel them. I see their hands pulling my insides apart. They want to wear me. Helena slapped him across the face. You're not gone yet. Focus on my voice. Another pillar cracked, this time with a sound like splitting bone. The creature at the edge began to move again, dragging its body forward, now half inside the chamber. Klein staggered back. I can't hold it. Something is feeding its strength. Juno drew a flare from her pack and struck it, throwing the red-hot light at the creature. It screeched and recoiled, smoke rising from its skin, retreating momentarily into the shadows. They hate fire, she said. We buy time with light. I've got a magnesium flare. 10 minutes, Max, Dominic said, lighting another. The cavern lit up in brilliant white, illuminating every jagged surface, and the full horror of the thing that stalked them. It wasn't alone anymore. From every side passage, creatures crept, some crawling, others upright, each a mockery of the human form. One had limbs like a spider's, ending in jagged bone. Another dragged a cage of ribs behind it, like a second torso. They all moved in silence except for the low, guttural clicking that echoed through the chamber like a metronome of doom. We either stay and die or go through that hole, Juno said, pointing to the gate in the floor. No way, Dominic replied. We don't know what's down there. Riley suddenly smiled, a wide, slack-jawed grin. She's down there. My mother. She said it's safe. Helena grabbed his face, furious. That's not your mother, Riley. That's the thing that wants to wear your skin. Riley screamed and tried to run toward the gate. Juno tackled him, wrestling him to the ground as he flailed and sobbed. Sedative, Helena snapped. Dominic tossed her a small injector from the emergency kit. She jabbed it into Riley's neck. He went limp, eyes fluttering. We go down, Klein said. Not because we want to, but because they're driving us toward it. That pit is bait. Then we don't give them what they want, Helena said. No, Klein said, eyes wild. We go with a plan. He stepped toward the edge of the gate, opening his book again. There's a passage here, one I never thought was literal. It talks about an inner sanctum, a heart within the prison. If we find it, destroy it, maybe we cut off their link to our world. You want us to dive headfirst into hell, hoping there's a kill switch? Dominic asked. Better than waiting here to die, Juno growled. Tie Riley to me. I'll carry him. We descend together. Helena drew a symbol on her palm, pressing it against one of the pillar's runes. The blood slowed, just slightly. I bought us minutes, she said. Let's move. Dominic dropped a rope into the pit, the magnesium flare tied to his belt. The rope vanished into thick darkness. One by one, they began their descent. Juno went first. Riley slung over her shoulder like dead weight. Then Dominic. Then Helena. Klein muttered a final prayer before stepping into the pit, his voice echoing like a death knell. As they rappelled downward, the air grew thick with a sulfuric stench. The walls pulsed around them, like descending into the throat of some immense beast. They passed carvings etched deep into the stone, depictions of rituals. Bodies flayed open, eyes torn out, symbols drawn in blood. And in every carving, the same figure stood at the center, tall, faceless, arms outstretched like a conductor, summoning madness. The rope ran out. They dropped the final few feet into a chamber that made the previous horrors look tame. Bones were stacked like bricks. The ceiling was so high it disappeared into shadow. And in the center of the room was a stone altar. On it, something pulsed. It looked like a heart, but scaled to monstrous proportions. And it was beating. Thump, thump, thump. Klein fell to his knees. It's alive. No, Helena said softly. It's awakening. The monstrous heart convulsed on the stone altar with unnatural rhythm, each beat sending a shudder through the earth. Thump. A low moan vibrated through the cavern. Thump. The blood-red veins, snaking from its core, pulsed with light, vanishing into the walls, the ceiling, even the floor beneath their feet. Helena stepped forward, her face locked in a cold, clinical expression that barely masked her terror. It's not just organic. It's a conduit. It's feeding the entire hive above. Those creatures, they're tethered to this. I can feel it inside my skull, Dominic muttered, staggering backward. Like it's humming into my bones. I don't want to hear this heartbeat. It's not for us. Behind them, Riley groaned. The sedative was wearing off. He blinked into the torchlight, sweat dripping from his brow. Where are we? Deep, Juno said grimly. Too deep. Riley's eyes locked onto the heart. His face slackened with awe. It's beautiful. No, Father Klein hissed, grabbing Riley's wrist. That's not awe. That's seduction. It's calling to your weakness. Don't listen. Suddenly, the veins pulsing from the heart began to stir. One of them twitched violently, then lunged. Juno shoved Riley aside just in time as the fleshy tendril slammed into the stone where he had stood, sending shards of rock flying. Another vein whipped out, curling around the base of the altar like a serpent. It's defending itself, Dominic shouted. This thing knows we're a threat. Helena ripped her pack open and yanked out a bundle of explosives, old, unstable, but deadly. I brought charges, enough to bring the roof down. If we take out the heart and this structure with it... Wait, Klein said. This could bring the entire mountain down on us. I'd rather be buried than let that thing live, she snapped, already unspooling detonation cord. The heart pulsed faster. The floor beneath them began to crack. Thin streams of black liquid oozed from the stone, smelling of rot and decay. Then the moaning began, not from the heart, from the walls. One by one, human-like figures began to emerge from the cracks, naked, pale, with hollow sockets where eyes should have been. Their skin was translucent, muscles and veins pulsing beneath like sacks of jelly. Host bodies, Klein murmured, trembling. Sacrifices, still alive. They reached for the group, not with violence, but with longing, as if begging to be saved or perhaps consumed. One opened its mouth and spoke in a child's voice. "Please don't wake him. Please, we don't want him to come back." Juno backed away, her pistol raised. "Helena, now would be a great time to move faster." Helena placed the last charge and armed the detonator, sweat pouring down her face. "We've got 60 seconds once I hit this. We need a way out, or it's suicide." "There!" Dominic pointed to a broken archway behind the altar, half collapsed but still open. "Tunnel behind that gate." The heart let out a final, thunderous pulse, and then the ceiling above screamed. That's the only word for it. The rock itself screamed. From the shadows, the faceless creature descended, limbs outstretched. It wasn't crawling this time. It was flying, hovering, its body unraveling into tendrils of black smoke that lashed through the air like lashes. "Go!" Klein roared. "I'll hold it." "No!" Helena shouted. "Don't you dare!" But the priest stepped forward, book in one hand, a crucifix burning in the other. "I swore I'd seal this gate, even if it took my soul." He turned, eyes glowing with the light of something other. "Run!" The team sprinted for the broken archway as the heart's veins lashed wildly, cutting into the ground, the air, everything. Dominic ducked a tendril that nearly took his arm off. Juno dragged Riley over the crumbling floor, both of them stumbling, barely ahead of the destruction. Helena clutched the detonator, finger trembling. Klein raised his crucifix and shouted a final invocation, then threw it into the heart. The heart convulsed, and Helena pressed the button. The chamber exploded. Stone shattered like glass. The altar vanished in a fireball of blood and smoke, and the heart's scream drowned everything else. Shock waves slammed the group into the tunnel, rock collapsing behind them as they were swallowed in darkness and fire. Silence. Time passed in fragments, soundless, chaotic. Helena awoke to dripping water and the hiss of settling stone. Her limbs ached. Blood ran down the side of her head. "Roll call," she croaked, coughing dust. "Here," came Dominic's voice, weak but alive. "Barely," Juno said, cradling her arm. "Riley's breathing. Might have a concussion." The tunnel they now occupied was unlike the ones above. Narrower, rougher, not man-made, natural, or older. Behind them, there was nothing but collapsed rubble. No going back. "Is it dead?" Dominic asked. "No," Helena said flatly. "I don't think it dies. But we broke it, slowed it, maybe cut the link." "And Klein?" Juno asked. They sat for a few moments, catching their breath. Then Riley stirred. "I saw something," he whispered. "Before the blast. Inside the heart. There was a man. Trapped. Screaming." Helena nodded slowly. "A prisoner." "No," Riley said. "A king. Something ancient. We didn't kill it. We just rattled the cage." Dominic stood, shining his flashlight deeper into the dark. "Then let's keep moving, before it tries to break out again." The passage ahead was strange, etched not by tools or time, but by pressure. Something massive had crawled through it once, dragging claws along the walls. Symbols appeared again, different ones now, sharper, angrier. As they walked, they began to hear it, breathing, not theirs, ahead. Something was waiting, and the abyss, it had only just begun. The breath echoed like wind through hollow lungs, drawn and dragged, long and rasping. It came from deep within the tunnel, growing louder as they advanced. Every step forward made their bones tremble. Something waited ahead, something ancient and aware. Riley lagged behind, eyes darting, his pupils dilated like he was seeing things the others couldn't. Helena kept a close eye on him. He hadn't said a word since they left the collapsed chamber, just whispered nonsense to himself. She wasn't convinced they'd escaped the influence of the heart. The tunnel ahead narrowed, the stone walls closing in with strange curvature. as if they were inside the belly of some petrified leviathan. Veins of black crystal laced the surface, faintly glowing with a sickly green hue. "Don't touch the walls," Juno warned, noting the way they pulsed when her light passed over them. "They're alive." Dominic ran his hand along his rifle. "Alive or not, anything jumps at us. I'll fill it with lead." "I don't think bullets work down here," Helena muttered. "We're not in the physical realm anymore." "Not entirely." The breath shifted pitch, higher, faster, and then it stopped. Total silence. Then, shifting, the crunch of something scraping rock behind them. Juno spun around, flashlight sweeping the dark. "Something's following us." Helena crouched, fingers brushing the dirt. "There are footprints, barefoot, human-sized, but not right. Look, the impressions in the soil were twisted, with too many toes. Some pointed backward. Others had claws. They weren't footprints. They were echoes of something pretending to be human." They pressed on, tighter now, weapons drawn, every nerve on edge. And then they reached the chamber. It was circular, vast, and entirely black. The floor disappeared into nothingness. Only a narrow stone bridge stretched across, ancient and cracked, suspended over what looked like endless void. Hovering above the void were dozens, maybe hundreds of figures, pale, silent, motionless. They floated midair, eyes glowing faint blue, mouths open in frozen screams. Men, women, even children, frozen in different stages of horror. They weren't alive, but they weren't dead either. "What the hell is this?" Dominic breathed. "They're the hollow ones," Helena said. "There's a passage in Klein's notes. People taken by the abyss. Their souls are devoured, but their bodies linger as beacons." As warnings, Juno crept forward, testing the bridge. "It's stable." Dominic went next, helping Riley shuffle across. Helena came last, her eyes fixed on the floating bodies. Halfway across, Riley stopped cold. "Mom?" he said. Helena froze. He was staring into the dark at one of the floating figures, an older woman with sunken eyes and a familiar tilt to her head. Her arms were outstretched, as if begging for an embrace. "It's her. It's really her," Riley whispered, eyes brimming. "It's a trap," Helena said. "Riley, keep moving." He took a step forward. The floating woman opened her mouth and screamed. It wasn't a scream of terror, it was a signal. The hollow ones stirred. Their heads turned in unison. Eyes lit up, brighter. They moved. Juno shouted, "Run!" They bolted across the bridge as the hollow ones descended, gliding silently like phantoms, arms outstretched. Dominic turned and fired. Bullets tore through them like mist. They didn't bleed. They didn't even flinch. "They're not physical!" Helena yelled. "Use light!" Juno pulled a flare from her belt and lit it, tossing it over her shoulder. The blaze hit one of the hollow ones, and it let out a shriek so high it shattered rock. The others recoiled, vaporizing into smoke. "Go!" she shouted, lighting another. "We need to get out of this bridge." They made it to the far side just as the last of the hollow ones faded, leaving only a dense fog of ash behind. Breathing hard, they stood before a doorway, twice their height, carved into the shape of a screaming face. The mouth gaped open into black. "I'm really starting to hate doors," Dominic muttered. Inside, the air was wet. The ground squelched beneath their boots, slick with something thick and sticky. Mold crept along the walls. Riley's voice cracked through the silence. "They're talking again." Juno looked at him. "Who's talking?" He pointed at the walls. "She says we're close, but not ready. We have to shed our names first. Then we'll see the truth." "Don't listen," Helena said. "It's messing with your mind. That's what this place does." "No," he said, smiling faintly. "This is what I'm meant for." He ran, straight into the dark. "Riley!" Helena screamed, chasing after him. They sprinted through the twisting corridors, the walls whispering louder now. Names, dates, voices from their past. "Helena, come home. You left me in the fire. Dominic, they're still burning." Their own thoughts turned against them, reshaped into daggers. Helena rounded a corner and stopped cold. Riley stood in the center of a circular chamber, arms spread wide. Above him floated a figure, featureless, 10 feet tall, its body made of shadow stitched with light. Its face was a blur of motion, never still. "I see you," it whispered, voice like 1,000 whispers combined. "I remember you." The entity looked at each of them, and they felt it, memories being torn from their minds. Juno dropped to her knees, eyes wide. "I can't remember my mother's face. It's taking my past." Dominic grunted, struggling to stand. "Fight it. Don't let it in." But Riley stood calmly, smiling. "I gave it my name," he said. "It promised me peace. I'm free." Then he collapsed. Helena ran to him, but his body was already hollow. Skin like wax, eyes empty. A shell. The creature drifted downward. "No names, no time, no self," it whispered. "Only us. Join the hollow." Dominic raised a flare and threw it at the creature. The chamber burst in violent green light. The creature recoiled, shrieking, vanishing into smoke. Helena cradled Riley's lifeless body, tears streaming. "He's gone," she whispered. Juno pulled her to her feet. "We can mourn when this is over, but not now. We finish this." Ahead, another passage. At the end of it, light pulsed, red, rhythmic. The heart might have been severed, but something deeper waited, something older, and they were descending straight into its cradle. They descended in silence, not because they were out of words, but because the deeper they went, the more sound became dangerous. The rock itself seemed to listen, waiting for vibrations, like a beast slumbering with one eye half open. Helena kept her steps light, pressing her back to the walls as the winding tunnel curved downward, like the throat of some monstrous thing. The air was thick with rot and rust. No mold, no wetness now, just dry decay. The walls had changed too. Gone were the soft, pulsating veins of earlier chambers. Here the stone was jagged, sharp, like rows of shattered teeth. They had entered the cradle, a tunnel born of gnashing mouths and bone. Dominic tapped Helena's shoulder and pointed at the stone near his feet. Carved in deep, erratic lines were symbols, scratched violently, almost like claw marks. The message, though not in English, bled its meaning into their minds. "What dies here is not remembered. What feeds here is never full." "I don't like that," Juno whispered. "I really don't like that." Helena knelt and traced the deepest groove. "These marks were made by hands, desperate ones. People came here before us." "And none came back," Dominic said, "because this isn't just a haunted cave. It's a womb. Something's being born here." The tunnel opened into a massive chamber, but this one was different, silent, still. The air did not move. No wind, no breath, not even the low hum of subterranean pressure. It felt wrong. The room was spherical, with no floor. Only hundreds of bone-like pillars jutting upward from an endless drop. Each one spiraled and sharp, like fangs. A labyrinth of ivory rising from a pit. And in the center, a throne. It looked grown, not built, formed from fused spines and blackened rib cages, draped in flesh that twitched with slow pulses. Upon it sat a figure, still, eyes closed. Its body was impossibly tall, skin stretched like canvas over elongated bones. No mouth, no nose, only a single lidless eye in the center of its chest, blood red and twitching. "Is it asleep?" Juno asked. Helena raised her hand. "Don't move!" But it was already too late. The eye blinked, and the pillars sang. The sound was a chorus of screams, some human, some animal, some unrecognizable. The noise wasn't external. It was inside them, filling their skulls, scratching behind their eyes, echoing through their blood. Juno dropped to her knees, clutching her ears. Dominic shouted something, but no words came. Just static. Then Helena saw the visions, flashes of fire and teeth, of writhing flesh, of cities built inside the earth, screaming eternally, of gods forgotten, locked in stone wombs, of the first explorers, swallowed by the earth, turned into veins in the body of the abyss. Helena staggered back and hit the wall hard, breath heaving. It wasn't just one creature. The abyss was a colony, a living network of thoughts, memories, pain. Each cave, each shadow, each flickering echo, they were its neurons, its consciousness, and she had just made contact. Helena! Dominic's voice broke through the static. You okay? She nodded weakly, wiping blood from her nose. The throne, she whispered. It's the brainstem. That thing. That eye. It's watching the entire system. What do we do? Juno asked, still on the ground shaking. We can't kill this. This isn't some ancient evil. This is an entire world. A living, thinking world. We can still break it, Helena said, eyes locked on the throne. Not kill, not destroy, but maybe lobotomize. Dominic raised a brow. We take out the brain? Helena pulled out the last of her gear, a compact explosive charge. Right under the throne. If we blast it out from below, maybe we can sever the eye's link to the rest. Maybe, Juno repeated, or maybe it wakes up angry. Helena looked at the creature. The eye blinked again, slow, drowsy, almost aware. She felt a tremor beneath her feet. They didn't have much time. The trio made their way down the side of the cavern, stepping along twisted bone bridges and cartilage-covered ledges. Helena carried the charge. Dominic carried a flare in each hand. Juno kept her rifle aimed at the eye, even though she knew it wouldn't matter. The pillars below started to move. Not violently, not yet, but they shifted as if responding to their presence, like nerves preparing to fire. We're inside its dream, Helena muttered, and it's waking up. They reached the throne's base. It towered over them, bones slick with rot and heat. The air smelled of burnt hair and ozone. The eye focused. Dominic stabbed a flare into the fleshy base of the throne. The light flared. The creature didn't move, but its eye twitched. 10 seconds, Helena said, setting the timer. No turning back. Suddenly the pillars screamed again. Not in their heads this time. For real. The sound was deafening. The throne creature stood. It didn't use legs, it levitated, its body elongating, stretching, flesh splitting and reforming into jagged limbs. It raised an arm of bone and flame, struck the ground, and the cavern began to collapse. Run! Juno shouted. The charge's countdown hit 3. Helena dove behind a rib wall as the ground exploded beneath the throne, sending fragments of bone and sinew raining down in a red-hot storm. The eye burst open, spilling black liquid that hissed as it hit the rock. The creature let out a soundless scream, and the pillars shattered. The throne crumbled. The lights, those veins in the walls, flickered. The collapse halted. The air grew still. They lay in silence, bodies bruised, lungs burning. Helena sat up slowly, covered in ash and gore. Did it work? Juno pulled herself up. It's quiet. Dominic pointed upward. Look. The walls had changed. No more veins. No glow. Just stone. Lifeless. Disconnected. They'd severed the cradle. But deep beneath their feet, something still breathed. Not dead, not gone. Just watching and waiting. Helena's ears rang with residual silence. Not the absence of sound, but a void so complete it pushed against her skull, like pressure from the deep. It was a hollow resonance, like standing inside a bell that had just been struck. They had severed the throne, disrupted the network, but they hadn't won. Not yet. Dominic flicked his light across the remains of the throne. It had collapsed inward like a ruptured cyst, weeping black ichor into the cracks. The eye lay split on the stone, twitching spasmodically like it still sought something to see. Whatever that thing was, he said, I think it was a nerve node. Not the brain, more like a mouthpiece. Helena nodded, her throat dry. We silenced one voice, but the abyss has more. Juno was already mapping the chamber. There's a breach, a fresh tunnel behind the remains. Looks like the blast opened a path further down. Dominic groaned. Of course it did, because we're not crawling toward salvation. We're sliding deeper into hell. They pressed forward, stepping over shredded cartilage and heaps of cracked bone. The tunnel was narrower here, slick and twitching, with something that felt embryonic, as if they weren't traveling through rock anymore, but inside some organic labyrinth, some living organism curled in endless slumber. And beneath the crunch of their boots came a new sound. Tick. A wet, soft click. Tick, tick, tick. It came from the walls, the ceiling, inside them. "Don't stop walking," Helena whispered. But Juno had frozen. "Guys," she whispered, "look!" The walls were changing. The stones sloughed away like dead skin, revealing flesh underneath. Pink, damp, covered in tiny, blinking eyes. They opened as the group passed, each one swirling with colors that didn't belong in nature. Some had pupils shaped like spirals, others like slits. One was human. Dominic's light flickered. He shook it, cursed. The tunnel ahead pulsed, and a figure stepped from the shadows. A girl, maybe 10, barefoot, eyes wide, hair matted to her skull. She wore a tattered dress, soaked in grime. Helena halted. "Stay back." The girl tilted her head. "You're going the wrong way." Her voice was calm, polite, not quite human. Juno stepped beside Helena. "Who are you?" "I used to be Emily," the girl said. "I came with my father, a long time ago." Dominic leveled his gun. "You're not real," Emily smiled. "That's what he said too, before he cut his eyes out." The lights died. Total darkness. Then came the scratching, all around. Something moved in the black, claws on stone, the wet patter of limbs not meant for walking. "Flares now!" Helena shouted. 3 brilliant red flames burst to life, casting the tunnel in violent, flickering light. The walls were alive with creatures. They clung to the surface like insects, gray-skinned, eyeless, with mouths that ran vertical down their faces. Long limbs bent the wrong way. Dozens of them. The things were watching, waiting. Helena didn't blink. "What are they?" Emily smiled again. "Caretakers. They make sure the dreaming never ends." Then she split, her form tearing like paper into smoke, scattering into the air. "Move!" Dominic shouted, opening fire. The gunshots echoed like thunder, but the bullets passed through the creatures like mist. Some recoiled, but most didn't flinch. The air turned thick, with pressure, heat, and dread. One of them dropped from the wall, its joints snapping in reverse. It landed in front of Helena, opened its vertical mouth, and let out a whisper. Not a scream. A name. "Helena!" She stumbled back. "It knows me." Juno hurled a flare at its feet. The thing hissed and vanished in a shriek of smoke. The others surged forward. "Run!" They sprinted through the winding corridor, ducking as the ceiling pulsed and limbs reached down. Dominic tossed flares behind them, the light buying precious seconds. The tunnel narrowed into a spiral shaft. A ladder, rusted and ancient, descended into darkness. No choice. They went down, one by one. Juno first, then Helena, then Dominic covering the rear. As Helena descended, the stone turned slick, wet. Every rung she touched seemed to shift, as if the metal were sinking into the wall's flesh. "What's this place?" she asked aloud. And then her hand gripped something warm. She froze. The ladder had ended, but her hand was still on something. It pulsed. She looked up. She was holding a finger. Helena screamed, lost her grip, and fell the last few feet, landing hard. The chamber they'd entered was circular and pulsing like a heartbeat. The walls were lined with faces, pressed into the stone, eyes closed, mouths open in silent screams. Not carved. Real. Juno helped her up, and they both stared at the horror around them. It was a crypt, not for the dead, but for those trapped between. "The abyss doesn't kill," Helena whispered. "It collects." Dominic dropped in behind them, panting. "What now?" In the center of the chamber was a pit. Inside, something glowed. Not light, not flame. A color, one that had no name. It called to them. Helena stepped closer. "That's the core." Juno's voice cracked. "How do you know?" "Because it knows me. It's been following us this whole time, watching, waiting for us to come to it." Dominic raised a flare. "So we throw in the last of our fire and end this?" "No," Helena said. "That would be too easy. This thing, it wants to burn, but only to be reborn. Fire purifies. We need something stronger, something that will trap it." Juno stared into the pit. "What do you mean?" But Helena didn't answer, because the walls began to open. All those faces, those trapped souls, started to sing, a low, humming chant that shook the walls, rattled bones. The core pulsed, then rose. It had no shape, no body. It was like ink suspended in oil, shifting constantly. Limbs grew and receded, eyes formed, opened, and vanished. It wasn't matter, it was memory given form. It didn't speak, but they all heard it, a wordless hunger, a question that burrowed into their hearts. Will you stay? And somehow the question made them want to kneel, to surrender, to forget who they were. Juno clutched Helena's arm. It's in my head. Helena clenched her fists. Fight it. But Dominic had stepped forward. He stared into the abyss and smiled. It's beautiful, he whispered. Helena lunged, but he was already gone. He jumped. The core swallowed him whole. The song stopped. The light dimmed. And for the first time, the abyss thanked them. Dominic's scream never echoed. He had vanished into the core like a dream dissolving at sunrise. No splash, no impact. Just gone. Helena stood at the edge of the pit, fists trembling, breath caught in her throat. Juno knelt beside her, muttering a string of broken words like a child chanting nonsense to keep away the dark. But it didn't matter anymore. Nothing mattered down here. Not memory, not reason, not time. The abyss had them, and it was hungry again. The walls around them quivered, the faces moaning in low, shuddering unison. Their mouths opened wide, emitting a soft static that grated on the nerves, like thousands of radios tuned to a frequency that didn't exist. Helena reached into her jacket and pulled out the last device she had, a cryocharge designed to flash freeze large geological faults during collapses. A last resort. You still have that? Juno asked, her eyes wide, voice hollow. I was saving it, Helena muttered, for myself. Juno didn't ask why, because they both knew what this was. Not an expedition. Not anymore. It was a funeral march. Helena paced the perimeter of the chamber. She studied the angles, the resonance of the pulse within the core. Every step closer caused her heart to stutter, her breath to catch. The thing in the pit was not alive, but it wasn't dead either. It existed between. Suspended in a half-dream, the mind of the cave reaching out, sampling memories, devouring thoughts, replacing them with obedience. Juno sat back against the wall, clutching her head. Helena, it's talking to me again. What's it saying? That I belong here, that I'm safe here, that I never existed outside of it. Helena kneeled in front of her. That's a lie. We climbed in. We can climb out. Juno looked up, eyes glassy. Number, you don't understand. And then she smiled, with Dominic's smile. Helena stumbled back. Juno stood, her movements slow, mechanical, her voice no longer hers. You severed one mouth, but we are many. The voice echoed, layered with tones. Dominic's, Juno's, Emily's. You gave it a name, the abyss. But it was you who breathed life into it. It was you who fed it stories, memories, beliefs. You brought yourselves here. We were waiting. Helena grabbed a flare from her belt and lit it. I know what you are. I saw you in the walls. I heard your song. You feed on identity. You make people forget who they were, until they become just another echo. You say that like it's a curse, the possessed Juno said. But isn't that all any of you ever want? To forget the pain, the fear, to dissolve? Helena tossed the flare at her feet and leapt back. Juno recoiled from the light, shielding her face. Juno, if any part of you is still in there, fight it, please. For a second, there was a flicker. A tear rolled down Juno's cheek. Then the thing inside her screamed, a high-pitched whistle like glass shattering inside the skull. The chamber shook. From above, the walls split open and the caretakers descended, skittering, twisted, dozens of them, their mouths wide, hissing. The faces in the walls began to chant again, low and rhythmic. Helena knew there was no escaping now, only ending it. She turned back to the core, removed the casing on the cryocharge, and activated the countdown. 30 seconds. She looked back once at Juno, who had collapsed on the floor, convulsing. I'm sorry, Helena whispered. Then she ran, straight toward the pit. The core pulsed, rising to meet her. It didn't lash out, didn't resist. It welcomed her. Helena dove into the pit as the countdown hit 3, and the world became frozen silence. When Helena opened her eyes, she was not in the chamber. She was nowhere, floating in a colorless space, her body weightless, thoughts drifting like smoke. Before her stood Dominic, whole, alive, smiling. "You came," he said. She didn't speak. "You always needed to understand," he continued, "to fix things, to put the puzzle together. But some puzzles shouldn't be solved." "You're not real," he shook his head. "Neither are you. Not here. Not anymore." The void cracked like a mirror, and then she was falling again. When she woke, she was lying on rock, solid, cold, real. She gasped for air and sat up. She was in the original cavern near the entrance, the same place where she and her team had first entered. But everything was different. The cave was no longer breathing, no light in the walls, no whispers, no bones, just empty stone and silence. "Juno!" she called. Nothing. "Dominic?" Her voice echoed. No answer. Helena stood, legs trembling. Her gear was scorched, her radio dead. She staggered to the mouth of the cave and emerged into gray daylight. Rain fell softly. Clouds rolled overhead. She turned back toward the cave. It looked normal, just rock and shadow. Not a portal, not a living thing. Had it all been real? She looked down at her hand. Pressed into her palm was a piece of something black and glistening, a fragment of the eye. It pulsed once, then went still. Helena dropped it, took one last look at the cave, and turned toward the trail. Behind her, far in the distance, thunder echoed. But it wasn't thunder. It was a voice, a whisper, soft as breath. "We remember you." And then, silence, true and complete. The end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and share it with friends who love horror, mystery, and dark explorations of the unknown. Would you have gone into the cave? And if so, would you have made it out? Let me know in the comments. And if you'd like more chilling stories like this, subscribe for the next journey into the shadows.